I guess I've already had my 2, so I'm done for the day. At least they don't taste like mutton.
Have you tried to have one?
Oh my God.
Or did you smell it and you're like, oh,
No, it's, I tasted
you did?
it. It didn't work. It tastes like it smells, I'm sorry. I'm sorry? You can put anything you want. Barbecue sauce, I can still smell it. It's, yeah, I can't eat it. That's okay. One person not eating mutton gives more for everybody else. Neuropsychological assessments are techniques designed to provide information about brain functioning and can offer valuable information to the diagnostic process. Okay, so if you have a memory problem, you have a brain damage, we use neuropsychological assessments in order to determine how bad it is. We're looking for traumatic brain injuries. This is the area of expertise for Dr. Wolf. So if you have a class with her, potentially she'll talk about these things. And she can talk about them with more authority than I can. Her knowledge is current, and my knowledge, of course, is 20 years old. So and it's fairly incomplete because we're talking about this stuff. So she can, I'll spit all over the place. So if you talk to Dr. Wolf, you can talk to her about her neuropsychological assessments and how she does them and some of the other techniques that they use. I don't know those techniques because I haven't worked in medicine for about 20 years now. So a lot of this stuff is new and I don't understand it. As I was saying in the last class, a lot of times knowledge is accelerated because of a crisis. During World War II, we needed weapons that could defeat the Germans and defeat the Japanese. When we started the war, we were flying biplanes and really slow monoplanes. By the end of the war, we were flying jets and dropping atomic weapons instead of conventional armament. And because of that, conventional ordnance. So anytime there's a crisis, it accelerates the process of learning about things. HIV is a perfect example. We didn't really know hardly anything about the immune system. HIV, the HIV crisis hit, the AIDS epidemic hit, and because of that, we had to find out about the immune system very, very rapidly to determine how more we could slow down the whole process of the AIDS epidemic and HIV. And now, of course, we can't cure it, but we can slow it down. We can eradicate it, but we can stop it. If you have HIV, potentially you'll have HIV unless your immune system kicks in and your immune system destroys it. And we know that. There are people that have had HIV that no longer have HIV. One of them is Magic Johnson. He was diagnosed with HIV. He was able to conceive a child. His wife does not have HIV, and never has had HIV, and the child doesn't have HIV. Now you may ask yourself the question, is it really his kid? Well, I'm not going to argue with whether it's his kid or not. But he doesn't have HIV, he's not HIV positive anymore. So one of the things that happens is that when a crisis occurs that we need to take care of, it accelerates our learning process. And that's what's happened with traumatic brain injuries. Because of the war in Iraq and the war in Afghanistan, because we have so many traumatic brain injuries due to IEDs, one of the things that has happened is that our knowledge about TBIs has accelerated. Because we have to learn about them in order to take care of the problems that we have seen. Okay. There we go. Some of these assess behavioral abilities to infer neurological integrity, while others involve imaging of the physical brain and its metabolic functioning. So one of the things that we do in psychology is we try to determine how bad your traumatic brain injury is. These types of tests measure a person's capacities in memory, attention, expressive and receptive language, and eye-hand coordination to indicate whether neurological difficulties should be suspected. If somebody has a stroke on the left side of their brain, it will affect the right side of their brain, their right side. Potentially their right side will be paralyzed. And for that reason, of course, we can do a neurological assessment, and we can determine how much damage has been done. The Halstead-Wrighton neurological battery consists of a variety of tasks involving, that's me. Oh, unknown. There we go. I'm going to answer a phone when it says the person on there is unknown. That doesn't make any sense. It's probably that lady that's trying to sell me a place in Branson, Missouri. For some reason, they think I need to visit there and buy their property. Branson, yeah, I know, Branson, Missouri. I thought if it was my wife, I'd answer the phone right on. Let me call my wife. I have 4 messages. See, I have 4 messages. How do I get them?
I don't know.
Oh, good. I don't know either. We'll see if I have 5 messages next time I talk to you. Okay, there we go. The Halstead-Wrighton, okay, so it involves verbal, auditory, and tactile assessments that gives an impairment index score and allows for comparison of an individual's test results to that of a normal unimpaired people. So what we do is we look at, there are select tests that test verbal, tests whether we can understand the spoken word, and whether we have our tactile assessment. We have tactile assessment where whether we can manipulate things or not. Anyway, so we have a level that has to do with people that are normal, and from that, of course, we can determine if you're abnormal due to the fact that you're not as normal as somebody else. Rapidly advancing technology in brain imaging techniques is providing vast improvement in our abilities to observe structures of the living brain and its functions. Once upon a time, all we could do was x-ray the brain. All we could do is take a picture of the outside of the brain. We couldn't really get into the brain. But now we can do MRIs, we can do CAT scans, and we can functional MRIs that will tell us how the brain is functioning and whether it's functioning properly. Anyway. Brain imaging is not currently useful for diagnosing an individual with a disorder or for verifying diagnosis for several reasons. Not everyone who carries a particular diagnosis will demonstrate the same pattern of brain function. One of the really fascinating things that happened back in the 1970s, we started visualizing boxers' brains. We started looking at boxers' brains. We started doing MRIs on boxers' brains and CAT scans. And what we discovered was that they were hollowing out from the inside. We looked at Muhammad Ali, who had been hit in the head a lot of times. And one of the things we discovered was that Muhammad Ali, the middle of Muhammad Ali's brain was actually emptying out. So the open areas, and we all have open areas in our brain, his open areas were actually expanded. And that had to do with the traumatic brain injury. And from those pictures, now we know, of course, that concussions will cause traumatic brain injury, will cause all kinds of interesting problems. Now we've discovered that people playing football, a lot of times they have concussions, small concussions. It's not the large concussions, it's the small concussions. And it's slowly destroying the brain from the inside out, as odd as that may seem. So a lot of these individuals who have played football, a lot of these individuals have depleted brain size, brain volume, and it's causing things like them to commit suicide. Junior Seau was a defensive, he was a linebacker for the San Diego Chargers for an extended length of time. They're not in San Diego anymore, are they? They're in Los Angeles. Yeah, they're in Los Angeles. But when they were in San Diego, he played for them. And Junior Seau was a Pacific Islander. He was a Samoan. went out on his surfboard one day and blew his brains out. When they did the autopsy, they discovered he had these brain injuries, these micro brain injuries that had had given him all kinds of interesting thoughts and ideas, and he committed suicide. Junior Sale, you remember Junior?
There was another one for Hernandez.
Oh yeah, yeah, and they said that his brain was the worst they'd ever seen. He murdered 2 people. Well, they convicted him of murdering 1 person, put him in jail forever, and then he committed suicide in jail while he was in prison. And when they did the autopsy, they discovered that his brain was a mess. He's really a mess. It was Aaron Hernandez. Yeah. There was another guy from my hometown. He was Dickerson, was his name. Yeah, he was from my home, actually from Muncie, which is odd because people in Indiana don't play football; they play basketball. But he was a defensive back for the Bears and for somebody else, the Browns, I think. Anyway, yeah, he committed suicide as well, and he had his brain. They did an autopsy, and when they discovered his brain was really destroyed from the inside out. Anyway, so we can visualize these things. There are no clearly identified norms for brain functioning in any diagnostic categories. So if we're looking at schizophrenia, a lot of times we can see something. But if somebody's suffering from obsessive compulsive disorder, we can't do a brain imaging test and find out if they are really suffering from obsessive compulsive disorder. If somebody's depressed, if somebody has anxiety, it doesn't change the structure of your brain. And not only that, but even if we did find something, an anomaly in your brain, is that what is causing the problem? Or if we take the 2 pictures of somebody's brain and you're suffering from paranoia and you're perfectly fine and you have exactly the same brain structures, what does that tell us? Nothing. It doesn't tell us anything. It's not causing your brain. Maybe it's causing your problem, but it's not causing your problem as far as you're concerned. I know. So this is really confusing. We can't just take a picture. We can't draw blood and determine if you have obsessive compulsive disorder. There is no blood test. There is no brain imaging test that we can use to diagnose you. The only thing we can diagnose you with is with brain damage from a stroke or from traumatic brain injury. Emotions and other psychological states are not as strictly localized in specific brain areas as once thought. Once upon a time, we thought that ADHD was caused by a undersized locus coeruleus or an oversized thalamus. That's what we thought. But now we know that ADHD can be anywhere in the brain. And you can have a normal-sized thalamus and a normal-sized locus coeruleus, and it's not going to cause you to have ADHD. Write that down, ADHD. Did you get your computer?
No.
This weekend. Oh. Is it coming? Is it going to be here? I'm so excited about your computer. According to the researchers and clinicians, members of the ethnic and racial minority groups use mental health services far less than other members of majority groups. Factors contributing to the disparity include cultural beliefs. Hispanics, for example, don't visit psychiatrists because it's insulting to them. And if somebody finds out, of course, then they will suffer from people making fun of them. Potentially there's language barriers. So if you don't speak the language of the individual that's doing the counseling, it's not going to do you a whole lot of good. Lack of information about available services, of course. One of the problems that we do have is that we don't have enough counselors, or all the counselors want to live in one place. So if we look at the number of counselors we have on this reservation, how many are there? Not very many. However, if we go down to Phoenix, there's a psychiatrist on every corner. There's one in every gas station. I know, it's crazy. They want to live. Why do they want to live in Phoenix? I don't like Phoenix. I don't want to live there. Or Flagstaff. There's lots of psychologists and psychiatrists in Flagstaff. But there's none here. There's none in Holbrook. There's none in Snowflake. There's none in Payson, Pike Payson, that's right. Albuquerque, there's tons of guys in Albuquerque, but there's none in Gallup. Why not? What's going on here?
Higher population in certain areas.
Oh, it's just what
Higher pay. Higher pay, yeah.
It's just where they want to live. So they want to live in Los Angeles, where they can be the psychologist of the stars. Where did Dr. Phil end up? I know, he started out in Oklahoma. But where did he end up? He ended up in Hollywood, didn't he? And now he's the producer of that television show, Bull. He's also on every day, isn't he, on Dr. Phil? Does
Isn't
something
he not
strange.
a real doctor, like he doesn't have a doctor's degree?
He does have, he's
I
a
thought he did.
no, he's a psychologist. He's a psychiatrist. But he's not a clinician. He's no longer a clinician. Okay, so he's not a clinical psychologist. And he never actually was a clinical psychologist. What he was, he had a degree in psychology, a PhD in psychology, but he worked with lawyers as a jury consultant, made millions. And then he worked with, evidently Oprah was being sued. And so he worked with her, and she was so impressed with him that he could read people, that she invited him on the Oprah show. And after that, he's just taken off like a rocket ship. Everybody wants to talk to Dr. Phil. You know, he can cure you in 30 minutes. Have you ever seen him on television?
Yeah.
He's amazing, isn't he? All psychologists should be able to cure you in 30 minutes. 30 minutes or less, depending on how many commercials there are. Okay, I know this is stupid. Okay, so cultural beliefs, language barriers, lack of information about available services, mistrust of the establishment and who can blame anybody, reliance on traditional remedies, economic situation doesn't allow you to have $125 to go see Dr. or $1,000 an hour for Dr. Phil. Yeah, that's going to happen. Current research shows that minority clients improve the same or less than majority clients, but never more than majority clients. In other words, white people, remember, this is Western psychology, okay? It's Western psychology, so it's going to work with white people, but it may not work with anybody else. It may not work as well. Doesn't work as well with Asians, doesn't work as well with African Americans, doesn't work as well with Hispanics, doesn't work as well with indigenous populations in the Americas. Minority clients tend to prefer therapists who are ethnically and racially similar to themselves. This was a really serious problem that we had up in Montana because there were 2 psychologists in the whole damn state. And guess how many of them were native? Neither of them were. But we had one native PhD, and she was Salish Kootenai. And if you know anything about Montana, there are seven different reservations, and only one of them is Salish Kootenai. Okay, only one of them is the Flathead. So she was able to work with those guys, but she couldn't come out into the plains. She could work with the mountain people, but she couldn't go up to Blackfeet and work with those guys. She couldn't work with anybody else. Anyway, so one of the things that we need more minority psychologists. They had a problem. She was working for a while at University of Montana, and she was okay with the Nez Perce. She was okay with the Salish Kootenai, the Coeur d'Alene, but she had a hard time working with the Sioux out in Fort Peck. Does that make sense? Am I being a racist here? I'm really not, because they didn't like her, for one thing, because she was Salish. So they needed people that were like them, and that's who they wanted to talk to. They either wanted to talk to somebody like them, or they wanted to talk to a white person. They didn't want to talk to a Salish people. And that was a problem. That was kind of a
culture like that?
I'm sorry?
Is every culture like that?
No, I don't think so. It really all depends. It really all
Depends on the person.
Well, it depends on the area too, and you know, the tribes in Montana, a lot of times there's a hostility between the different groups, to some extent. Anyway. Lots of stories, lots of really cool stories, okay. And a lot of this stuff reflects back to what happened 150 years ago. You know, everybody hates the Crows. Why the hell do you hate the Crows? They look just like you, they act just like you, they dance different. You know, why do you hate the Crows? You know. Does anybody know why they hate the Crows? They speak a Siouan language, just like the guys at Fort Peck. But the people in Fort Peck hate them. Why? 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 What's wrong with the Crows?
They're more hostile.
They fought with the cavalry. They were the scouts. They were the scouts that were scouting for Custer at the Little Bighorn. And most of them refused to go into battle because they knew what was going to happen. They had already had a premonition as to what was going to happen. So there were like 15 of them and only 5 of them went into battle. Of course they were anyway, that's why they don't like them. Which is weird because half the time, okay, so remember Chief Joseph? You know, he broke off the reservation and he was trying to make it up into Canada, and they stopped him just before he got to Canada. Guess who the scouts were? Only in the beginning. And then it turned out to be Crazy Horse's band, because they hated the Nez Perce. So it was Crazy Horse's people who were scouting for the government. And of course, they had already, Custer had already occurred, Little Bighorn had already occurred, and here Crazy Horse was dead by this time, but it was his band that was scouting. And when they saw, when the Nez Perce saw Crazy Horse riding into the area, they thought he was coming to help them. And it turned out he was not at all. He was on the other side. Whoops. Sometimes it's a whoops. Anyway, not important. None of this stuff is important. Anyway, so what am I talking about? So sometimes it's better if you're talking to people that understand you and know who you are and like you. That's sometimes important. And you know, if you have somebody that is like you, then the possibility of recovery is a lot higher. And that's one of the reasons why. And a lot of you guys have talked about helping the people on the reservation. Now, you're talking about helping your own people, and you know that's a really, really positive thing. Can you help other people? Well, potentially. It all depends on who they are. It all depends on who they are. It really does, and whether they accept you or not. And sometimes it just doesn't. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't. So I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what to say. Sensitivity to cultural issues increases the possibility of recovery. So the more sensitive you are to these individuals, the more likely they are to recover. So you need to figure out who the hell they are. The other thing, and this is something I tell the people in 291, you need to understand, okay, just because you're from this reservation, you need to figure out how traditional they are. Whether this is a factor as far as they're concerned. You can't assume that they're traditional. Especially if they're wearing a t-shirt with skulls on it, which some people do. You would think that would be culturally inappropriate, right? But there are people that wander around with skulls on their outfits, right? Yes, okay. Should that happen? Well, I don't know. How traditional are you? And that's the question that you have to ask yourself. So it's the first thing you need to figure out is how culturally aware they are. Okay, you can't assume that just because somebody. Does this make sense, Travis? Does this make sense? Is this something that you guys did? Try to determine where they were as far as their culture is concerned. Yeah. And this is real. Okay. Sometimes this is what you have to figure out before you can help them. Maybe who knows what they need to help them. But the first thing you need to do is figure. I'm sorry?
You need to do that assessment first.
That's why you need to do the assessment. Yeah. You need to figure out who they are and how they're going to respond to you.
I think through diagnostician, there would be a reason why they would have those skulls on them,
Mm-hmm.
or the cause and effect of their lifestyle.
Right.
Of
Yeah,
what they
exactly.
are.
It has to do with their lifestyle.
Yeah, contributing factors to the way they dress,
Exactly.
and through the crystal gazing or through the diagnostician,
Right.
they would determine whether it's coming from grief, loss,
Right.
of some sort. So
Right. Or maybe they just like a rock band that has, Guns N' Roses that in the middle of their. Right?
Yeah.
I know. I'm not saying you're wrong. What I'm saying is, you just never know who you're talking to. I was in the first semester I was here. I was teaching substance abuse, and I had 6 students in the class, and so people kept telling me, you got to be careful about death. You got to be careful about death. So one day I'm looking around the classroom, and 4 out of the 6 people had skulls, had T-shirts with skulls on them, and I'm thinking, wait a minute. You just told me I needed to be careful about this, and here all of a sudden I've got 6 students that don't seem to care about the death taboo. Here they are, they're wearing rock concert T-shirts or whatever. It's really kind of fascinating. Kind of fascinating, but maybe not that fascinating. Okay. Anyway, it's just something that you need to think about. Not everybody's as traditional as you may be. Okay, sorry that this is blue. I haven't figured out what's going on yet. Okay. So in health psychology, I was talking about stress. And so what do I get to talk about today? I get to talk about stress in abnormal psychology as well. So if I say the same thing twice, I apologize. The connection between the health of the body and the attitude of the mind has been pondered for centuries. Rene Descartes believed that the body and the mind were separate, and he referred to this as dualism. The brain was separate from the body, and the brain would not affect the body. But now we know that that's not true. We know that one affects the other. But it took a long time to figure this out. When I first started in psychology in the 1970s, they believed in dualism. And then in the middle 70s, they came up with a thing called body-mind integration, where the two were melded together. But doctors still didn't agree with this. Psychologists did, some psychologists did, but other psychologists didn't. The behaviorists didn't believe it. Freudians did, of course. Of course, Freudians did. They knew what hysteria was, but they didn't believe it. So it took medicine about 10 years to figure out that sometimes your mental problems can cause a physical reaction. And that was known as body-mind integration. Scientists who study the psychological factors that play a role in physical health are called health psychologists. The leading psychological factor in health psychology is stress. One of the things that I practice, and the reason that I practice this is because I was in medicine for an extended length of time, and I realized that sometimes you can cure people by being happy, by acting happy around them. And this is referred to as positive psychology. It works, as strange as that may seem. It works. All you have to do is be pleasant. How odd is that? Yeah, I know. I've lived in towns where everybody should have died, I'll tell you what. They were so damn grouchy. Not that I was going to grab an AK-47 and start popping away at people. That's not what I was talking about. A stressor refers to any challenge and demand placed upon an organism. The physical and behavioral effects that a stressor produces are referred to as a stress response. So we have stressors and we have stress responses. It really all depends on where you are and who you are as to how you respond to these things. I keep telling the stories about me working in the emergency room, extremely stressful, really, really stressful. I was so keyed up by the end of the day, I couldn't go to sleep when I went home. I'd have to stay up for a while. I'd have to watch television to come down off of the adrenaline high that I had. I wasn't finding it stressful. I was finding it exciting. I really enjoyed working in the emergency room. And what would drive me crazy would be if I worked in the emergency room and nothing happened that night. It would drive me nuts. Because there was nothing to do. I wanted somebody's arm to fall. Come on, some gunshot wounds. Let's go. Come on, let's have a good time. Entertain me, come on, entertain me somehow. Sources of stress, tests in school, not my tests, of course. Are there tests in here? I've got tests, don't I? Don't I have tests? Isn't there? There's 3 tests, aren't there?
You changed your mind.
I didn't
You changed your mind, yeah, you
I
over
didn't
changed
change
your
my
mind.
mind. Okay, this is what's going to happen. You're not going to take any of those tests until like May. And then all of a sudden you're going to take all 3 tests. All right, anyway. Yeah, you need to stay up on your tests. However, if something happens and you can't take the test when I think that you should or when you think you should, then don't worry about it. Just take it whenever you can, okay? That's what I keep trying to tell people. The problem is that people keep putting these things off, and then I get all these written assignments right at the end of the semester. I'm not pointing any fingers, but I could. Those of you who have been in my class before and have done this to me over and over again, I need to go home in May so I can mow the yard. My wife hates to mow, and I live in Iowa where the grass grows really, really fast. We have to mow at least once a week. So I need to go home and I need to work. I need to relieve my poor wife from the John Deere tractor that we use to mow the lawn. So please get things done so I can go home. I need to go home. I try to be flexible, but at the same time, I want to go home and see my wife and mow my yard. That's what I really want to mow the yard. Okay. Mowing, it's more important than anything else. It is Valentine's Day. Okay. Test in school, relationship problems, death of a loved one. Of course, this can cause really a lot of problems. Divorce, job termination, traffic jams, not around here, probably, we're okay. Chinley, maybe, you stop at that one stop sign. You have to wait, 5 seconds, 10 seconds. Traffic jams, extreme temperatures, of course, or noise, anything extreme. It does get hot here in the summertime, right? What happened the day before I drove home last year? We got 6 inches of snow. I know. And I was in my little Miata. Okay. Oh man, it's got 3 inches of clearance and we got 6 inches of snow. Okay, you're getting the picture. Okay. By the time I got down to Gallup, the snow was all gone. An adjustment disorder is a maladaptive reaction to an identified stressor. This maladaptation leads to problems in the following areas of functioning: your social functioning, your occupational functioning. I got some bad news last week. Somebody gave me a hard time, and I was feeling really bad. So if I was kind of grouchy last week, that's the reason I was grouchy. And I may get grouchy again because this thing may come back and, you know how it works. It bites you somewhere, and I'm not going to tell you where, but it does bite you. Social situations, of course, I don't have any problems with that. Academic functioning, of course, it's going to affect all of these things. I was behind in my grading. There was just a ton of things that were going on, so my academic functioning wasn't that high. Anyway, these things can all be affected, right? It happens. So stressors can do that to you. The problem also causes emotional distress that is greater than that normally seen with this stressor. So if you just handle this, but all of a sudden things just seem to be piling up on you, of course your reaction is going to be more extreme. And that's the problem with stressors. They seem to be additive. It's not the big stressors, it's the little stressors. So all of a sudden, everything's fine. You have a big stress, but you're able to handle the test, Christine's test, because Christine's tests are different from everybody else's. So you took her test, and that's okay, but you go home and by golly, the toilet doesn't work, and now you have to fix it. My toilet doesn't work, I put a pin in there, and now I can flush it. But before, it was running all the time. It was so horrible. And then one time my water froze and I couldn't take a shower in the morning. I know, it froze between my water heater and my bathtub. I know, I couldn't turn on the water, I couldn't flush the toilet. Oh my God. These things add up and they really bother you. Adjustment disorders are not extreme and usually last less than 6 months. Adjustment disorders. That's you trying to adjust to whatever your stress is. It is normal to react negatively to negative life events such as death and divorce. When normal functioning is abbreviated, it is an adjustment disorder. So we always react negatively to these things, and we have to understand that. That's especially in the DSM-5. In the DSM-4, bereavement was considered a mental illness, and of course if it lasted longer than 6 months, then we had a problem. Divorce is always a kick in the head or wherever. It's really tough. The first time I got a divorce, I went down from 145 pounds to 117 pounds. I lost that much weight, and here I am. I'm feeding my kids every day. I'm eating, but I'm losing weight, and I went down to 117 pounds. So the second time I got a divorce, I was better off. No problems. I only went down from 150 to 119 pounds the second time. So it didn't bother me hardly at all. You can imagine how skinny I was at 119 pounds. I weigh 185 right now, so you can imagine how skinny I was. Psychoneuroimmunology studies the relationship between the psychological system, the nervous system, and the body's immune system. The body's reaction to stress involves the response of the endocrine system. And we're going to talk about the endocrine system right now. The body responds to stress by activating the endocrine system. This comes out of your hypothalamus. The hypothalamus is the first organ that is affected. The hypothalamus reads the stress. It produces corticotropin-releasing hormone, or CRH. The CRH affects the pituitary gland. It stimulates the pituitary gland to produce ACTH, or adrenocorticotropic hormone. So we've got CRH from the hypothalamus. It's dripping down into the pituitary gland. The pituitary gland is producing ACTH. It pumps it into the blood supply. So now we have ACTH circulating in our bodies. And at that point, it stimulates the outer layer of the adrenal glands. So it starts here, and it ends up right on top of your kidneys, going through your blood. Your kidneys, of course, are filtering out all of your blood. So the ACTH stimulates your adrenal cortex to release corticosteroids. The corticosteroids are cortisone and cortisol. Now, if you've ever injured a joint, then potentially one of the things they shot into your joint was cortisone, right? You get a cortisone shot. Has that ever happened to anybody? No? Oh man, they gave me a cortisone shot. It hurts. It hurts so bad. They gave me a cortisone shot one time. I passed out. I mean, I dropped out. I hardly ever black out. If they gave me that shot and I passed out, I know I didn't even need the shot. That was a stupid thing.
Where was this at?
I know, this is what happened. We were playing in the championship softball game up to the base, and one of the guys that played on the team was the surgeon. And the surgeon was the worst softball player you ever met. I mean, he was just horrible. And so he hardly ever played. But I was okay. I was a pretty good softball player. Okay. And in the game before, the guy had tried to take me out and hit me in the leg. And it twisted my knee, and I had a pain in my knee. I know. Strange stuff. So what happens, the surgeon decides he's going to give me a cortisone shot so that I can play in the big game. Of course, I was going to play in the big game anyway, even if I had to, hop around on one foot. But anyway, gave me the cortisone shot, knocked me out. At the time, I wasn't married, and I was kind of flirting with his nurse. Yeah, I know. And so I was kind of flirting a little bit with his nurse, and so what happens next? I pass out. Okay. I know. So I look like the biggest wimp in the whole wide world. She never dated me. I know. It's kind of a tragic story. And it's all because of the cortisone shot, I'm sure. Anyway. Sorry. It's a good Valentine's story. Okay, so all these corticosteroids are being produced. Steroids boost resistance by fostering muscle development, building immune responses, and releasing sugar from your liver. And of course, the sugar gives you more energy. And of course, that's what happened with me and my knee. We won the game. So, okay, I know. And the surgeon didn't have to play because he wanted to make sure that he was the 10th man, okay, or the 11th man. We played 10. So he was the 11th guy, and since I got to play, he didn't have to play, so he was really happy. And that's really the reason he gave the shot. Could it be my wife? No, it's the same number. It's an unknown number. I don't know what that means.
It's Valentine's Day.
You know, I've been alive for 68 years, and that has never happened to me, okay? Ever. Not in my 68 years. Even when I wasn't married, that didn't happen to me, okay?
Secret admirer.
Yay.
From the inner layer of the adrenal glands, the adrenal medulla, comes catecholamines. Catecholamines are epinephrine and norepinephrine, or adrenaline and noradrenaline. These are the substances that get you excited. If you have adrenaline running through your body, you can do amazing things. It gives you superhuman powers. You can lift cars off of people. And it's because of this adrenaline surge that you get. People do amazing things on adrenaline. Not that we can inject you with adrenaline. If I injected all of you with adrenaline right now, and I gave you enough to lift a car off of a baby, one of the things that would happen would make you sick to your stomach and you'd start throwing up, which is, I know, that's no fun. Okay. Anyway, but the stuff that circulates through your body, you'd be fine with it. And of course, then you can do superhuman things. There was a case in Vietnam in 1968. One of the aircraft carriers that was servicing the people on the mainland, a plane crashed and it started on fire. So they had to evacuate the ship. But one of the things they had to do before they did that was get rid of all the bombs. Well, here's all these 500 and 200, 300, 500 pound bombs, and they had to get rid of them. Well, there weren't enough carts to take them and dump them off the aircraft carrier. So this one guy started grabbing bombs, picking them up. They're really not made to be picked up like that. He picked them up and he went over to the side and dropped them off. And it was his adrenaline, this fact that he had all this adrenaline running through his body. And he picked up 200-pound bombs, dropped them off the side. 300-pound bombs, dropped them off the side. I know. This is a dead lift. He picked up 500-pound bombs. This guy weighed 145 pounds. Yeah. But the fire was getting closer. The adrenaline hit him, and he was able to do superhuman things. People have been known to lift cars off of children because of the adrenaline surge. Okay, so it does give you superhuman strength. That individual was given a Silver Star for his bravery. For one thing, he was going into an area that had started on fire already. He was taking bombs and dropping them off the side. If the bombs had exploded, who knows how many people would have died. He probably would have died. Anyway, so adrenaline is one of those things that gives you superhuman strength. The primary structure of the immune system are leukocytes. These are all leukocytes, and unfortunately you can't see this is not a very good picture, unfortunately. But if you have better pictures, you can see the red, you can see the pink, and you can see the red cells actually look red. There are 5 different types of white cells, and this is one of the jobs that I had when I was in the service. This is one of the jobs I had when I was a laboratory technician. I would do a differential, and I would differentiate between one cell and the other. Well, you can see that these are all red cells. This is a platelet right here. But these white cells look different. They have different structures. They have different cytoplasms. They have different granulation in the cell. Unfortunately, these two look alike, but they're not. This one's orange and this one's dark blue. But there's 5 different types of cells. The type of cells the most numerous cells that we have in our system are neutrophils. And neutrophils fight bacteria. They capture bacteria. So they're the ones that if you cut your arm and you get manure in your arm, all of the bacteria from the manure will be killed by these neutrophils. And this is what a neutrophil looks like. As you can see, it has a different shaped cytoplasm. And those two are neutrophils, actually. The second most abundant cell we have in our body are lymphocytes. And lymphocytes fight viruses. One of the reasons that the indigenous peoples of the Americas had such a difficult time with the invasion of the Europeans was because so many people died from viruses. You had never come in contact with any of these viruses before. The reason that they had viruses was because they lived with their pigs. I know, this is so bizarre. They lived with their pigs, and there weren't any pigs over here. Okay? There's no pigs in the Americas. Pigs have a very similar immune system, have a very similar physical system to humans. So they lived with their pigs, so they were trading all their diseases back and forth, and they were coming up with these super diseases like smallpox and measles, and there's like 10 different types of measles. But one of them is called the German measles, right? You've heard of the German measles. Why? Because it's a European disease. The Europeans, they still do. They still live with their pigs. It's the most bizarre thing in the world. So I moved to Germany, and we're stationed over there, and I'm living in a farmer's house, and I go over to visit the farmer, and what do I see in his basement? In his basement, underneath the first floor. That's where his barn is. So he's got all these pigs and he's got all these cows down there. And if they need to dump some trash, they just dump it down in with the pigs. They just dump it down in with the pigs. Not with the cows, because cows don't eat trash. But pigs do. They'll eat anything. They're like goats. Anyway, so they're trading diseases back and forth. And the pigs don't get sick from the disease, but the pigs are a secondary host. So they gets into their system and it changes, it mutates in the pig's system, and now all of a sudden we got a new type of measles or chickenpox or whatever. I know. And that's one of the reasons why when the Europeans came over here, that you guys couldn't fight off these diseases because your immune systems had never seen viruses like this before. You didn't have any pigs as a secondary host. And a lot of Europeans, of course, died from these diseases, from smallpox and measles. But of course, they had immunity against it, but you guys had no immunity at all. So potentially, and it all depends on who you're reading, but potentially 99% of the people that were living in the Americas at the time died from these diseases. We know that the Spanish conquistadors landed in South America, and the reason that they were able to defeat the Aztecs in Mexico and the Incas in South America was because they all came down with all these fevers and these diseases. They killed them all. One of the problems with the Incas was that the head Inca died of a disease, so he left his son, who was this idiot guy that was just a teenager, and he couldn't lead the armies, and for that reason the conquistadors were able to defeat the Incas. And the same thing happened with the Aztecs. Montezuma was the Aztec leader at the time. Anyway, okay, so we have all these lymphocytes. You have lymphocytes in your system, and viruses, they fight viruses. So if you come down with mononucleosis, we have an increase of monocytes. And this is what a monocyte looks like. Neutrophils, monocytes, eosinophils are for allergens. So if you came in contact with a parasite, if you came in contact with pollen and you reacted to it, you would have an increase of eosinophils. And this is what an eosinophil looks like. I apologize. It's actually orange. This is actually orange. Eosinophils. So we can draw your blood and we can look at your blood to find out what diseases you guys are suffering from, what anybody's suffering from. If you have an increase of neutrophils, we know it's a bacterial infection. If you had an appendicitis, it's usually caused by a bacteria. If you had an appendicitis, you'd have an increase of the number of neutrophils. If you have a cold, if you have rhinitis, or the flu, then you're going to have an increase in the number of lymphocytes. If it's just an allergy, we can draw your blood and find out how many eosinophils you have in your system. And we can look at that, we can determine whether you have an allergic reaction or whether it's something else. Let's say that you get poisoned, you've been licking the walls, and the walls are painted with lead-based paint. I know. People lick the walls all the time. Kids eat paint chips. In that case, you would have an increase of basophils. And the basophils, of course, are phagocytic, and they would try to engulf all the toxins that you would see in the system. Now, we all have cancers all the time. We have mutated cells all the time in our bodies. As we get older, we have more and more mutated cells. And these potentially will cause cancers. But because we have monocytes circulating through our system, these are phagocytic as well, they will engulf the cancer. They will stop the cancer. And one of the really fascinating things, if you have ever had a cancer surgery done, which none of you ever, well, some of you have had cancer surgery done, but if you've ever encountered a cancer, and I have, I've had skin cancer, one of the things that they tell you is it benign or is it malignant? If it's malignant, it means that it's not being arrested by your immune system. If it's benign, it means that it's been encapsulated by your immune system. And the reason it's been encapsulated is because of those monocytes. They have found the cancer, they have isolated it, and now it can't grow. So that's the reason, that's the definition of a benign cancer, is one that has already been arrested. It's already been encapsulated. And a lot of times that's what happens when they cut it out. They will cut out a capsule of cancer cells. And it hasn't been able to go anyplace. But if it has been able to metastasize, now it's malignant. Now it's dangerous, and they have to eradicate it. Anyway, cancer. So monocytes fight cancers, as exciting as that is. Leukocytes recognize pathogens because of a protein on the surface of the pathogen called an antigen. Everything is made up of proteins. Viruses are made up of proteins. Allergens are made up of proteins. Everything's made up of proteins. That's the wind. It's not banshees. It's like screaming. Okay. All right. So everything's made up of proteins, and on the surface of the proteins, these proteins are specific to whatever the virus is, whatever the bacteria is. And the proteins on the surface of whatever it is are known as antigens. The leukocytes will produce a corresponding antibody that destroy the antigen. It will destroy the bacteria, it will destroy the virus. So if you've ever had chickenpox, which is caused by varicella zoster, it causes chickenpox. If you've ever had the chickenpox, you're not going to get the chickenpox again. Right? You can only have the chickenpox once. If you've ever been inoculated against chickenpox, you won't have to worry about it. You'll never get the chickenpox. However, chickenpox is caused by varicella zoster. And if you've ever had shingles, that means that chickenpox virus has come back. But the only reason you're going to get shingles is if you're immunosuppressed. In other words, your immune system isn't strong enough to keep it down. Throughout your entire life, shingles usually only happens to older people. I had it a couple of years ago. It only happens to old folks, okay? My wife's had it. I know, this is really kind of interesting. So if you've ever had the shingles, that means that you were immunosuppressed. And of course, when I got the shingles, I'm going, oh my God, what's happening? Of course, I just don't feel, I know. It was really traumatic here the first year I was here. Worried about all the taboos, worried about somebody complaining about something. Oh man, I was just scared I was going to say the wrong thing. Because I usually do say the wrong thing, right, Chris? No, in most cases I do. Okay, so the leukocytes will produce antibodies against the antigen. And so the next time that virus or that bacteria tries to invade your body, you will already have antibodies that fight it, and it will destroy it automatically. It'll go right to the site. It recognizes it as an antigen, and you won't get sick again. And that's the way the chickenpox works. So once you have had the antibody in your body, you can't get that disease again. Or at least your body will be geared up to fight it. So it won't be nearly as bad. Now the reason that the flu is bad every year, and it's bad this year, it's already killed over 50 people, over almost 60 people. It's already killed that many people. So why in the world didn't they give us a flu shot that would keep the flu from making us sick? Because every year the flu changes. And we don't know what it's going to be in the future. We only know what it was last year. We only know what it was in the past. So we can't produce antibodies that will fight against whatever it is this year. We can only fight against what it was last year. Does that make sense? Okay. So we have another problem with pigs. Remember, Europeans live with their pigs, and that's the reason that we had all those diseases, all those amazing diseases that came over here. The Asians also live with their pigs. They fertilize their fields with human waste. And then they allow their pigs to, to eat. So how can we tell the Chinese to stop doing that? Because that's where the flu comes from every year. It comes out of China, comes out of Taiwan, comes out of Korea. And for that reason, we got a problem. We got a really serious problem. But it changes every year, it mutates every year. Because they live with their pigs. Once again, they live with their pigs. Okay. Okay. So what's happening? The lymphocytes that attach to the antibodies are called T cells. So if one of the problems with HIV was caused by a virus, a retrovirus, a virus of a virus that invaded the T cells, and it replaced the T cells with its own DNA. Instead of having your DNA in the T cell, now the T cell has a foreign DNA. Okay, it would have the HIV DNA, the retrovirus, as confusing as that is. So that made the T cells not be able to recognize your cells. So your immune system destroyed the T cells. So now you don't have those T cells wandering around your system identifying antigens anymore. So all of a sudden you got sick with all kinds of interesting diseases that people usually didn't get sick from. In essence, you had to become a bubble boy. In other words, you were susceptible to everything because your immune system suddenly isn't working anymore. And that's why the HIV killed so many people. Okay, that's all we're going to talk about the immune system. The general adaptation syndrome was developed by Hans Selye. The syndrome consists of 3 stages after the stressor triggers a response. The first response is the alarm reaction, and this is good. You need the alarm reaction. The body prepares for fight or flight. All of those chemicals that we were talking about before, the epinephrine, the norepinephrine, the cortisol, the cortisone, all of this is being pumped through your body so that you can handle the stress. And you need to handle the stress. If the stressor isn't relieved, and of course, usually, so normally what happens is the stress goes away. You alleviate it, or you run away so that you're not close to it anymore. The next stage is, if it's not relieved, is the reaction stage, where the body tries to conserve its resources. So whereas before you were fighting or doing whatever you needed to do in order to survive, now all of a sudden your body is slowing things down. Instead of having adrenaline so that you can lift that 200-pound bomb, all of a sudden you don't have the ability to lift that 200-pound bomb anymore, or the 500-pound bomb. You can't do it. It's heavy. Now all of a sudden you realize how heavy it actually is. That's the reaction formation, reaction stage. The final stage is the exhaustion stage, where the body just shuts down. So if you are asked to do this over and over and over and over and over again, you go through the reaction stage, and then all of a sudden your body will just shut down. And sometimes it kills you. Sometimes you will die from the exhaustion stage. Sometimes you die. If you've ever watched a movie about men riding horses, you know, they can get the horses to run and run and run and run, and all of a sudden, the horse keels over and dies. It breaks its heart or whatever. What is that movie about the guy racing across the Arabian desert? Is that what it is? Hidalgo. Yeah, Hidalgo. Remember at the end of the movie, he starts bleeding out of his nose, the horse starts bleeding out of his nose, and you're thinking, oh my God, he's going to keel over and die, but of course he wins the race. I know, I was so happy. And he was just a little bitty horse, and he showed them Arabs about Mustangs from the United States. I know, kind of exciting. Anyway, horses will do the same thing. I mean, you can work them to death. Humans will do the same thing. You can work them to death. Sometimes. It depends on who they are and where they are. And there you go. This is how it works. Short duration, the alarm stage is only supposed to last for a short period of time. If it lasts for a longer period of time, then you go into the resistance or the reaction stage. And then at the exhaustion stage, you've depleted all your resources. And at that stage, potentially you could die. There you go. See that? That's him dead. Okay. You can tell because he's purple through all that. And then all of a sudden he's white. All right. That's what happens to purple people when they die. They turn white. We saw that in E.T. Remember E.T.? You've never seen that movie? In the end, at the end of the movie, he turns white, and everybody thinks he's dead. But he's not dead, is he? He comes back. Oh, I'm sorry. During the exhaustion stage, the parasympathetic branch of the autonomic nervous system takes over, and the body decelerates its response. If the stressor persists, the individual might develop a disease of adaptation. If they don't die, of course, they develop a disease of adaptation. So if you're under a lot of stress, this is what happened to my sister. Did I tell that in the last class or this class? It was the last class, wasn't it? Okay. My sister was under a great deal of stress, and she had a heart problem, and eventually she developed cancer. The reason she developed cancer was because she was under so much stress for an extended length of time. Disease of adaptation can take any form, usually in a weakened organ or a system. In her case, she did not exercise, so the first area that it affected was her heart, and she developed cardiomyopathy. What had happened was that her husband told her that he didn't want to be a boy anymore. That's not bad. He was transgender. He decided he wanted to be transgender, and it upset my sister to the extent that she developed all kinds of interesting problems. It was very stressful for her, as you can imagine. She really liked it. I know, that's the sense. I know, this is Valentine's Day, so we can talk about love. No, let's not do that. Okay. Anyway, so it was really stressed her out. It really bothered her a lot. And so she developed heart problems. It always affects the weakest organ you got. My sister always had problems with her reproductive organs. She had a fibroid uterus. Her periods when she was young were always... I'm a guy, and I was her brother, and I didn't really care. But they seemed to be prolonged, and she always was really grouchy. And, I mean, she had a really bad time with her periods. So her reproductive organs were in pretty bad shape. So she had a fibroid uterus, so she couldn't have children because it was fibroid. And they had to do a hysterectomy. Wait a minute, what am I talking about? Stress. We're talking about stress. Okay. So when she became stressed out, she never exercised. She hated exercise. She wouldn't even walk. If she could ride, she'd ride. She never walked. She never did that. Never walked upstairs. All of this stuff. So she's lazy. So what does it affect first? It affects her heart. Her heart gets sick because she's not a healthy person. And the second place that it bothered was her other organs that she always had problems with, her reproductive organs. And she developed cancer in her reproductive organs, and eventually she died. But the whole point is that when you have these diseases of adaptation, they always hit whatever is weakest in you. So when I was born, I had bad teeth. So anytime I go through anything stressful, my gums swell up. I know, it's really kind of bizarre. Anyway, what else? There are other things that happen. I've had bad kidneys in the past, and sometimes I have kidney problems. Diseases of adaptation. Okay, allergic reactions might be diseases of adaptation. Heart disease might result from the stress that an individual experiences, and that's what happened with my sister. She developed cardiomyopathy from the stress of her husband telling her that he was a female on the inside. Corticosteroids only assist the immune system for a short period of time. If the stressor persists, the corticosteroids will actually begin depleting the immune system rather than building it up. So all of a sudden you become immunosuppressed. Now we've got a problem. Now we've got a really serious problem, because if you have any kind of a physical problem, it's going to get worse. It's going to be worse. And as far as my sister was concerned, she's stressed out because of her husband, and next thing you know, she's got cardiomyopathy. She's got heart problems. This occurs because the immune system does not have a chance to create antibodies, since it is making white cells and trying to fight off all of these diseases. Psychological factors that moderate stress, self-efficacy expectancies. This is confidence. That's all that self-efficacy expectancies mean. It means being confident. I used to be a lab tech, and one of the things that I had to do was go into a room and draw blood from somebody. Well, a lot of people have really crappy veins. I don't know if you've ever noticed. Okay, they're really tiny. Okay, I mean really bad. I worked in a children's hospital, and if you think adults are bad, you ought to draw some blood from kids. Because kids don't understand. You know, they're 2 and 3 years old, and you're trying to draw blood from them, and all they want to do is cry and move around, right? Well, of course they do, because they're kids and they don't understand. But the doctors ordered the test, and I don't have a choice. I've got to stick that needle in that kid's arm and get his blood, or her blood, whichever case it may be. Right? But I did it for such a long time that every time I went into a room, I knew I was going to get that kid's blood. Self-efficacy expectancy. I had the confidence that I knew I was going to get his blood. When we were up in Montana, I worked in a clinic for my wife. I was helping her out. And we had all these people coming in to have their blood drawn. It was a special thing, and they got a discount on the blood work and whatnot. Anyway, so some of the people that came in were Hutterites. You guys have no clue who Hutterites are. It's a religious group, and they've got the crappiest veins you've ever seen. I mean, there's like genetically they've got bad veins. It's just really terrible. So the whole colony would come in. And of course, here I am, I'm drawing everybody. And the reason I get to draw everybody is because I never miss, okay? I always get their blood. And so I got to draw all the really bad people, the really bad veins. I'm looking for somebody with a big juicy vein the size of my finger, you know, so and the blood just comes gushing out, right? That's what I know, that's the way you want it. But these guys have veins that look like spider webs. I know. Sarah's the same way. She can't stand to even talk about it. Anyway, self-efficacy expectancy. Self-efficacy expectancies. I had the confidence to know that. Does your arm hurt now? Psychological hardiness. Psychological hardiness means that you're resilient, and that you know you're resilient, and you know that whatever happens to you, you're going to be able to handle it. You're going to be able to handle anything that comes along. Psychological hardiness. Optimism. Do you think that you're going to fail, or do you think that you're going to be successful? If you're optimistic, you know that you're going to be successful. So we have confidence, we have psychological hardiness, we have optimism, humor. Humor works really, really well. It's really interesting because you can talk people into having good veins. I know this sounds really weird. If you joke with them, their veins all of a sudden, I mean, they come in and they're all pale and they're kind of sweaty because they're scared that they're going to be digging around on their arm. I know, exactly.
But then you joke with them and you talk to them, and all of a sudden their face turns pink and their blood vessels all of a sudden pop up because you're joking with them. Humor really works. If you take their mind off of the bad thing, then potentially you can actually get their veins to come up. They're scared. They're scared. That's why their veins are so small. But if you can talk them out of it, it really works. Humor really works. Social support. That's your mom, your dad, your next door neighbor. It's all the nice people that you talk to. You know, social support. Ethnic identity. Really? Ethnic identity will make you stronger? It really does it? Does it? Does the fact that you know that who you are, does that really make you strong? It really does. It does. And we've done research after research after research. I did a research up in Montana, and that's exactly what I discovered. This is the most important factor. You need to know who you are. And if you recognize who you are, and you embrace who you are, then it makes you stronger. Once upon a time in the United States, African Americans were denigrated. There was a lot of prejudice against these poor, unfortunate individuals that were brought over here. They didn't voluntarily come over, they were brought over as slaves. And this is a really bad situation. So for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, these people were denigrated. They were called really bad names, names that were insulting. And then finally in the 1960s, they started a program, they started a concept that black is beautiful. And that's all it took. All of a sudden, these individuals that had suffered for all these hundreds of years, it gave them the strength to fight. To tell people, no, stop doing that to me. You can't call me that horrible N-word. That's not a nice thing. I don't want you to do that anymore. It gave them the guts to do that. Ethnic identity. And it was this really interesting program where they started talking about black is beautiful. They used to straighten their hair. I don't know if you know anything about African Americans. Their hair's kind of curly. It's real curly, okay? We can even refer to it as kinky because it's so, the curls are so tight. And they used to straighten their hair so that they would look like white people. But once this Black is Beautiful program started, this whole advertising campaign, they stopped doing that and they started letting their hair just grow naturally. It changed everything. I know, it's fascinating. They suddenly realized that they were important too, and it gave them the strength to fight. And that's when the civil rights movement took off, and of course, now we have what we have today. We have people that we wouldn't even consider referring to them in negative terms, because we just think of them as other Americans. Ethnic identity, extremely important. This is the perfect example. Of course, at the same time, if you understand the civil rights movement, right after the civil rights movement kicked off, the AIM movement started on the Indian reservations. And that helped a lot too. It helped a ton. Okay? Does that make sense?
What was the example for psychological hardness?
I can't remember. What do they say? Resilience, yeah, resilience. I'm sorry. I can't remember what I was saying from one minute to the next. Accumulative, acculturative stress happens in the United States, of course. This is them trying to force American Indians to become white people. They did this in the boarding schools. As ugly as that is, they tried to change your culture. They wouldn't let you. They cut your hair. They wouldn't let you speak your language. They dressed you up like little white people. But then what kind of jobs did they train you to do? Crap agricultural jobs. I know, it's really goofball stuff. It's just stupid. Anyway, that causes a culture of stress. Psychological factors that moderate stress.
There are different styles of coping. Emotional focused coping and problem focused coping are the two types that we're going to talk about. Emotion focused coping, one of the ways of dealing with this is by denying that the stressor exists. So if you've ever been around somebody that is in denial, they claim that they don't have a problem. So you have to have an intervention where you're telling them, hey, look, you've got a drinking problem, okay? And they're saying, no, I don't have a problem. I can quit anytime I want. I can quit today, and I'm going to. Of course, tomorrow afternoon now. I can stop drinking water anytime I want. I drink lemonade, and by golly, I could stop drinking this lemonade and not drink any more lemonade for the rest of my life. By golly, I could do that. I'm not addicted to it even a little bit. It tastes too good, I can't stop. Or they may withdraw from the situation. That's another emotional focused coping technique. Theoretical perspective of, we're talking about headaches. There is a theoretical perspective as to why people have headaches. People respond to stress in individual ways. This is known as individual response specificity. Some people get headaches, some people get backaches, some people drink, some people smoke, some people punch the wall. When I found out that my wife was leaving me, I punched the wall. There was a cement wall, and I punched the hole in that cement block. I know, adrenaline. I was superhuman. I punched a hole in the wall. I was in a housing development. I was in a housing unit, and I lived in the second apartment. And I punched a wall in the first apartment. I know. My fist isn't that big, and I didn't really make that big a hole. Okay, it was only
Did
this.
your hand hurt?
No, it didn't hurt at all. I was surprised I didn't break my hand. I think that's what I was hoping for. Anyway, I didn't break my hand. I know. Then I could have gone to my wife and said, "Look what you made me do. Don't you feel sorry for me? Won't you come back now?" I know. I was stupid. I was lucky that she left. I'll tell you the story later. While migraine headaches are genetic triggers, may be general stress. Some stress that cause migraine headaches include bright lights, can trigger a migraine headache. A change in barometric pressure. And if you want to know what a change in barometric pressure is, we just had one. The storm moved in, and of course the barometric pressure just plummeted. So potentially we're going to get rain or snow or something. That's barometric pressure. Pollen can trigger a migraine headache. Select drugs can cause a migraine headache. In the United States, we don't allow monosodium glutamate anymore. Monosodium glutamate tastes like nuts. Okay, they used to put it in Chinese food. They always put monosodium glutamate in Chinese food. But for like the last 15 years, it's been outlawed in the United States. Why? Because it triggers migraine headaches in select individuals. They used to put it in salads. It made the lettuce taste better. But we don't do that anymore. And Chinese food doesn't taste as good as it used to. I swear. Can't stand it. Okay, anyway, that's monosodium glutamate. Red wine, of course, has select things in it that can trigger the migraine headaches and hunger if you get hungry. So if you are susceptible to migraines, one of the things you have to do is be sure that you eat on a schedule. Why don't we stop right here and we'll pick this up next time. I know I was going too slow. Is this chapter 5?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm caught up, right? Okay, tell all your friends. I'm usually behind.
Was that migraine? I just had one yesterday.
Oh, you did? I'm so sorry.